Hello, everybody. Good morning. I hope you all had a good break. Such a pleasure to be here. I'm super happy to share some of this journey with you. Keeping things short, let's say life starts back in 2018. So that was when I was asked to help on Nubank's international expansion. And it's not every day that you get asked to help on such a super strategic move, so I immediately said yes. And I had a few options on where to start. It could be our core financial backend services or cloud infrastructure. And thinking about how we were going to make it possible to launch our products in a different country, I thought this was the most important thing we needed to figure out, the cloud infrastructure. Very quick context on Nubank before we dive into it. Has anyone heard of Nubank before? Can I see some hands? Oh, wow, that's surprising. Lots of people. Cool. Yeah, because Nubank is a Brazilian fintech, started in 2013. We launched the free credit card in 2014 that became a huge boom in Brazil, as you noticed with the numbers. So it was super crazy. And here's just some current data of our numbers today, just to give some context. We have an incredibly homogeneous tech stack. Our main programming language is Clojure for backend services. And we use Datomic as database, which is an append-only database, also written in Clojure, so we're pretty into functional programming. Yeah, but let's get back to 2018, when Nubank only had operations in Brazil and two main products. We had a credit card and a very recently launched simple bank account. So where do we even start from? Despite the wishes of the business to have an MVP launched in 6 months, I knew this infrastructure work was a multiple-year journey. So how do I build an architecture, vision, a strategy? Should I make a 5-year plan? It was very overwhelming. So I opted to go with an incremental approach, like fancy words for just duplicate everything. So to move from one country to 2 countries, the first plan was to just duplicate everything, like whenever copy and paste just a snippet of code, but maybe in a different scale in this case. And to be fair, we wanted to just copy and paste only the parts that were needed. That was the initial plan. But yeah, why not like a fresh, uncluttered start, like creating a new repository, like a new code repository, all possibilities there. You can do everything right this time. But for our infrastructure, it meant we were going to provision everything in a new AWS account. So we use AWS as our main cloud provider. It felt really good, a bit overwhelming, but still good. I obviously wasn't going to work on this alone. But my work mode at that period of time was more like I was a free agent, moving from team to team, collaborating to get things done. So that was 2018. So that was the first milestone then. We had here, you can see Brazil, we have a AWS organization and a Brazil AWS account. And on the side, very simplified version of what's in this AWS account. So we have our production and staging environments with Kubernetes, Kafka, and Zookeeper, the microservices all running Kubernetes. And then apart from the staging and production environments, we also had all the developer internal tooling, our continuous integration and delivery pipelines and platform, our data platform, and also the AWS identity and access management. So we did the first milestone. We created a new account for Mexico, completely separated. We had pretty comprehensive infrastructure as code in place, so good support and automation for provision most of that, especially the staging and production environment. But everything else outside of that, so most of that was things that was done just once. So the first milestone was good for us to understand the requirements, learn about the pain points, have an interactive process, and build a lot of playbooks. So we documented every step of the way, every bash command, every API call, and even like next step, go talk to that person with the Slack handle, like they know what to do because some of those things weren't documented. So yeah, this was a good start. So we enabled Mexico to have the credit card launched with friends and family with this very basic infrastructure. We obviously knew here, like, you see there's something missing, the parts that are not the staging and production environment. So a lot of that had not a lot of support of automation, so we weren't sure, like, we didn't want to duplicate everything. It would be hard to maintain. So the data platform, the internal tooling, CI/CD, for example, like, I'm using those as examples, but there's a lot more stuff here that I'm not showing, like especially the low-level infrastructure stuff, like network, DNS, the machine images, just a bunch of stuff. So we decided that we actually didn't want to duplicate everything. We wanted to share some of that stuff. But because of the lack of support and automation, we decided to just kind of share what we had currently running in Brazil for Mexico. So that was the first step, but we immediately made a plan on how we were going to keep evolving this, because we knew we're going to launch more countries and not just Mexico. So it wouldn't be ideal to have all that stuff running in Brazil, being shared, like it would get very messy very quick. So then we started to think about the next step of how to go then from 2 countries to multiple countries. And that's where we were starting to plan our shared services layer. We needed to promote those shared services, one of these to be officially shared services. So we were looking at the concept of landing zone, which is basically something that new cloud adopters use to get a good sense on how to get started, which wasn't our case, being a cloud native business, but the concept was interesting for us. So this is just from their website, Google Cloud, Azure, and AWS. Because AWS was our main provider, we rely more on the recommendations from AWS. So a landing zone is a well-architected multi-account AWS environment that provides a starting point from which your organization can quickly launch and deploy workloads and applications. But it's not just the account structure. It's tightly connected to the future business goals and what your organization wants to achieve. And for AWS, it basically means having that multi-account environment in place. So this was our initial plan, and included a separate AWS organization for each country, so that each legal entity had their own billing and could be financially independent. Then a worldwide organization for all the shared services that were not specific to a country, and expecting to have multiple countries under this organization. And also a sandbox where we could play and safely experiment in AWS. This is a first view, also very simplified, of what we did with the worldwide and the 2 countries that existed. So we first created a log account, a security, and 1 account for our data platform. The logs were supposed to have all the centralized logs from all the accounts, so that we plug all of our observability and monitoring tools into that instead of just getting logs from all the different places. Security, to centralize all the security monitoring and tooling there, and also the data platform. And we decided that we were going to build our data platform for Mexico and new countries, and we would eventually migrate Brazil, which never happened. So this is where we started, and this felt really good because we could have more clear boundaries for shared services and avoid any coupling with specific operations. So then finally comes 2020. We were still thinking about, how are we going to move from 2 countries to N countries, and could be any number from 10 to 20, we didn't know. But then we announced that we were going to launch in Colombia. It would be our next country, but it was also going to be the last. Colombia was a chance for us to test everything we had done before, so we were able to provision everything much faster. We did some incremental work on automation, network, and VPC. And my work mode here was kind of changed a bit. It was more like distributing work to others was more delegating. I was opening up space for others to lead projects and work on those big migrations that were happening. So yeah, we launched Colombia. We also started to migrate our continuous integration and delivery platform to worldwide. So it was also a relief to have Colombia being created in this new setup because there was a lot less to provision. We also created a new AWS account in worldwide for our internal share tools. So that's where all the non-customer facing products were going into, all the internal stuff from artifact repositories up to internal HR. Anything that wasn't like a customer facing product would be migrated there. So we created this new environment. This migration is still happening until today because there's so much to do, and also like with interruptions, right? So we're now going to launch more countries anytime soon. So the problem has changed. So we were trying to understand what was the new problem. And it was basically growing the customer base in the current countries that we were operating in. Also more focus on mergers and acquisitions. And how to onboard the acquired companies in our infrastructure, launching a bank account in Mexico and Colombia. We had just launched credit card by then, and it's way easier because with the bank account comes a lot of challenges of regulatory requirements. So the problem changed, but we knew that the work was still vital for all those new problems we needed to solve. So we just had to repurpose things and prioritize accordingly. So we were still on that multi-account journey, right? But we were afraid of creating too many accounts. We knew we weren't ready to maintain and support so many replicas of our entire infrastructure in new accounts. We were concerned about things, how do we make sure that everything is up to date? How do we make sure that all the essential stuff is there? Do we have logs being sent to where it needs to be? Do we have sneaky users being created with admin permissions that nobody knows? So this is my work mode shift again. I thought I needed a small team to explore this further. So we gathered a small informal group of 3 engineers, no clear place in the organization. It was just 3 rebels thinking about this problem. And we came up with the idea of this cloud infrastructure baselines. So the goal here was to have a consistent level of maturity across all the AWS accounts, define standards for cloud infrastructure at Nubank, no matter AWS or other cloud providers. We wanted to make sure that all the compliance and like the governance things were in place. And also part of the goal was to reduce time and complexity to have this production-ready infrastructure environment, be it for new countries or new business acquisitions. So here's also a very, very simplified idea of what the baselines would look like. So in each AWS account, it could be very different what's inside. So it could be one of our transactional environments, staging or production. It could be Tecton, our CI/CD platform. It could be our data platform that has a different tech stack. It could be a third party, bring your own cloud solution, something we bought and want to self-host, or a tech stack from an acquired company. So it could be anything, but all the low-level stuff had to be there consistently. And this is also just some examples. The list will be longer, but some of that stuff we really care about as part of those core baselines. Access management, security and audit, network, and being connected to our CI/CD platform. So apparently we had this multi-account strategy going on, and this was the prerequisite for all of it to happen. The cloud infrastructure baselines, where we would have the standards consistently applied. We would have also more efficient process of managing and creating new accounts, and also making sure we were applying the industry best practices. On the other side of things, there are also the whole worldwide global platforms work. We had this work of removing those dependencies from Brazil and moving to this shared space. So there was, this work is still going on. There's still a bunch to do there. And this is where we are now. Currently, this is what I'm working on now, partitioning workloads into separate accounts. We're separating staging production environments, and we're going to also separate things into more, so our staging production environments have everything in there. All the products, we're kind of starting to think how we can use this multi-account structure to better support different growth needs of these different products. So this is where we are today. This is the current era. The biggest challenge to create this standardized low-level layer was to break a monolith. We rely very heavily on naming conventions in our code base, and concepts like an environment is directly mapped to an AWS region. So there was a bunch of stuff that was very crystallized deeply in the code base, in scripts, and also in people's minds. So it was difficult to make incremental changes. Like a small change would mean changing everything, and you don't want to change everything at the network level because it's very scary. So we wanted the baselines to follow different principles, the classic less coupling and more cohesion, and have them as independent components. And the work mode here also changed from last year to now. That informal team of 3 rebel engineers grew into a dedicated 12-people team. So it's official. We even have OKRs now. So it's definitely official. I think I have done my best to summarize 5 years of work of literally hundreds of people. But I think this work was very important to build a more solid foundation for hopefully the next years of Nubank. I would also like to share some personal learnings from this experience about my role in all of this. Lots of people talked about this, so I'm not going to repeat what everybody already said. But this is some of what worked for me. Make it inspiring to influence many teams across the organization. Visibility and good timing. I used every opportunity I found to prioritize the work using company-wide forums and initiatives like relentlessly. And I think this is the most important one, find good partners and sponsors. I think I'm very lucky to have the most amazing engineers working with me on this. So they made this all happen. And I'm very grateful for their trust. And also great leaders, VPs and directors sponsoring this work, which isn't the easiest to get visibility on or people to fund this type of work. Lots of people are extremely uncomfortable navigating ambiguous situations and unknowns. I would get asked all the time, but how is it going to look like in 3 years, in 2 years, in 5 years? Tell me, show me a diagram. How is it exactly going to look like? And I was like, I don't know. What helped me a lot was to define principles, because the principles will help you make decisions according to them instead of having a detailed implementation plan. And just working my mind to be comfortable in the unknown because it's temporary. And I think the last one here is important to get out of planning mode, to take action, to execute. I learn by doing. So I just want to do stuff and see how it plays out. More on execution. Someone has to be the first to show confidence going in a certain direction. And if you're asking yourself who that should be, it should probably be you. So be willing to make decisions and take controlled risks. Don't follow the plan. I mean, do follow the plan, but always be alert and observe what's changing. Is this still relevant? Is this still the most important thing we could be doing? Keep checking constantly. And take things to the finish line. I know it's not always easy. I left a bunch of stuff behind, but I try my best to always take things to completion. This is where I usually ask for help. It can be a full-time job to keep track of several projects going on and communicate about all of it that's going on. So I really use the help of different functions in my organization and in my team to help with this. And also formalities. I don't know about you, but over the years, I get asked so many times, like, what team are you in? Who do you report to? What exactly are you doing? So what really helped me there was to make agreements, to set up expectations so I could get recognized by this work, and also to have a smooth performance evaluation. Also know the organization, where you would be best positioned in the org chart to make your initiative succeed, because it's not anywhere. And also don't be intimidated by not fitting the mold. Yeah, so I have no idea what would have happened if I had written a 5-year plan years ago. Even though I knew back then it was going to be a multi-year work, it turned out that observing, understanding, and adapting made a quite good plan and got us where we are today. So thank you so much.